Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. We've opened up our photo album of history, and we've looked at some of those sort of single pages in the photo album. We've looked at Melchizedek. We had a couple of pages on Sarah. We looked at Hosea. We looked at Jethro. But now we come to that section of the photograph album that is just pages and pages thick. And we just sort of start to thumb through it this morning. And we'll start to look at David. But David raises us a general question. What do we do when God does not follow the law? What do we do when God does not follow the law? That sounds wrong. It sounds like something you shouldn't preach. Certainly God follows the law. He made the law. He knows the law. So we have to wrestle a little bit when we look at the pictures and scratch our head a little bit as the photo album begins to unfold a little bit. And it might even help us look at how we view law. Mainly, I hope it helps us look at how we view God. Because we have a vision that God represents to us. He shows us. And we're going to see how he does that with David. Now, the photo album of David is very familiar to you. You've looked at these pictures a lot of times. Just imagine that one where the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And we find David out with the sheep. And we see that picture of David out in the pasture. And he's taking care of the sheep. And while he's taking care of the sheep, we come back and tour the house with him in the evening. And he says, you see that rug right there? That's the lion that attacked me while I was taking care of the sheep. And I grabbed him by the beard and I smote him. And you see that bear rug over there? That's the bear that came after me. And I was taking care of the sheep and I grabbed him by the beard and I smote that bear. I took him down. It was by the power of God. When I'm taking care of the sheep, God is with me. God helps me take care of the sheep. The Lord is my shepherd. He's my defender and my protector. And these are the images. These are the things I have to show that God has helped me in those moments. Maybe we look down at the next picture and it's got this 8 strapping young men in the picture. And we look at it and say, you go ahead, you just pick one. Which one do you think was king of Israel? No, it wasn't Eliab. It wasn't that old tall guy out in the back there. You see that little short guy down front? The one in the picture? Kind of reddish in the face? He's the one that God picked to be king of Israel. He was a man after God's own heart. This last image on the right gives us a heart. He's the man after God's own heart. Samuel came to the house one day, and as he stood between the lion rug and the bear rug, he kept looking at all of the sons coming in. Until finally God said, no, none of these guys are my servant. Have you got any more kids? Well, I've got one more out with the sheep. Go get him. And in comes David. And God says, you stop looking the way men look and you start looking the way I see things. I see his heart. There's the king of Israel standing right there. That's my king. That's the one. There's kind of a gross picture of David in the photo album. He's holding this bloody head. It's been chopped off. It's the head of Goliath. Oh, we love that picture. I mean, we don't like to think about it being that gory, but that's just how gory it was. Because David's dad, Jesse, calls him in and says, here's some cheese and some bread. I want you to take them to your brother at the battle lines. I want to be sure they're taken care of very well. And they're out fighting those Philistines, so leave the sheep alone today and you go take this food to them. And this guy comes running up to the battle lines and everybody's all lined up. And there's this great big tall guy, nearly 10 feet tall over there. And he's yelling at the army of God. And this kid shows up, scratches his head. I didn't think this is how armies worked. I thought when they insulted your king and your God, that you fought. I've got a lion's rug at home and a bear's rug, and every time that my life was compromised, I trusted in God, and he delivered me. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? That's in 1 Samuel 17 there. Who is this guy? Y'all are listening to him every day. He's out here yelling across this ravine. Send out your champion. Evidently, we don't have one. Saul's supposed to be our champion. He's the king. We can't find a champion to go fight Goliath. For over a month, he's been yelling every morning, every evening, send out your champion. No one shows up. David really has this image. His photo album at home is filled with what God has done. I mean, his great-great-grandmother's picture there, Rahab the harlot. His grandmother's picture is there. Oh, we've got these wonderful images that come. Oh, she's Ruth the Moabitess. Boy, the family album has lots of variety in it, doesn't it? We sort of expect David's family album to be pure Jew. No, it's kind of messed up. It's not exactly. Don't lose the question. What do we do when God doesn't follow the law? When he invites Canaanites into the family and he invites Moabites into the family, when they weren't supposed to be in the family. They weren't supposed to be there at all. David finally gets to be king. He won't kill King Saul and get him out of the way. It's been some years now. Finally, Saul and Jonathan are dead, and he comes down to that point. Oh, thank you, Richard. Oh, boy. We had a goal of 25,000. So the first number is a 2. That's a good sign. No, 26,739. So you met your goal. You did very well. Thank you, Richard. And thanks for those that counted it. And I know some of you are going to give online. The Givelify envelope will stay online through the end of the year. So it will grow from that. But we do celebrate and rejoice that. When David finally gets to be king, he has to reign over Judah for 7.5 years in the city of Hebron. He's not up in Jerusalem. And finally, the situation clarifies itself, and the rest of Israel comes to him and says, look, you're the guy that God picked to be king over all of us, so you be king over all of us. And David begins to be king over everyone in Jerusalem. And the kingdom is sort of consolidated. And then David says, I've got this cool house that God provided for me. Hiram got me the cedar for it. And I've built this wonderful place. But there's something missing in Jerusalem. The Ark of God is not here yet. We ought to have the Ark of God. The Philistines had stolen it. They got tumors and were overrun with mice, so they got rid of it. And it's made its way to Kiriath Jearim. And that's where it's being held. And David says, we ought to go down there and get that ark and bring it into the city of David, the city of God. That would really be the cherry on top. God has always been with me. I've always honored God. And I'd love to have the ark of God with me. When we pick up the story in 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse 4, they've gone down and they've put the ark on a cart. And they've got cattle that are pulling the ark. And Ahio is out in front, and a guy by the name of Uzzah is walking beside the cart. Everybody knows Uzzah's name. He's one of those famous guys in the photo album. And they come to this threshing floor. And as they get near the threshing floor, the oxen sort of get out of hand and they start to upset the cart. And the ark of God starts to slip, or that's the perception Uzzah has. And he reaches out and touches it. And God strikes him dead right there. We love that God. I can deal with that God. I understand that God. That's the God that keeps the rules. That's the God that follows the law. I know this God. He said, that's not how you carry my ark. I don't know how they got it on the cart. Maybe they slipped poles in and set it on the cart. I don't know how they got the ark on the cart. But nobody died then. And the Philistines had put the ark on a cart, and none of them died then. They even put little idols with it, tumors and mice made out of gold, set it right there on the cart and sent it along on its way. Now, King David comes with Israel, and he's behind the ark, and he's rejoicing, and they're come across here, and he's finally getting to consolidate his kingdom and bring God home into his house, into his place. And they're going along, and Uzzah reaches out, and God just strikes him dead. We know this story. We know why God did it. Right? And we like the God that keeps the law. You disrespected me. You didn't carry it the way I told you to carry it. I told you to put it on poles. Let the sons of Kohath pick it up. Let them cart the ark. That's how they're supposed to do it, not the ark on a cart. They're supposed to do it the way I told them to do it. And I can really deal pretty well with the God who makes the law. I understand him. Most of you do too. David hits pause. If there was a pause button, we have to imagine for a moment that we have a video page in our photo album, and he hits pause. And the action stops. Now, how can I bring that ark in here now? Well, let me read a little. 2 Samuel 6, verse 4. So they brought it with the ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Ahiel was walking ahead of the ark. Meanwhile, David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all kinds of instruments made of fir wood, with lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out toward the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it. And the anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for his irreverence. And he died there by the ark of God. David became angry. So in our photo album, our ancestor is angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah. And the place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. So David was afraid of the Lord that day. And he said, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? And David was unwilling to move the ark. Pause. Can't bring that into the city. There's something I don't understand. I'm at a loss. I'm angry at God because all we were doing was celebrating and trying to honor him and bring him where he belongs. And he struck Uzzah dead. David was smart enough to hit pause, though. Just take it over to Obed-Edom's house and leave it there. So they take the ark over to Obed-Edom's house and leave it for 3 months. David watches. Nothing bad happens to Obed-Edom. As a matter of fact, everything Obed-Edom does is blessed. His house is blessed. Things go very well for Obed-Edom. And David finally says, all right, I think it's safe. I think I can deal with God again. Let's go get it. This next time, they carry it the way they're supposed to. And they bring the ark into the city. And David just dances so much behind the ark. He is rejoicing so loud that his wife's embarrassed. Did you ever rejoice so loud your wife was embarrassed? Michal is ashamed of David. He is dancing before the Lord, and he has on a linen ephod, and evidently he is a little too exuberant. In his wife's opinion, he's acting foolish. We don't know anything about political leaders that act foolish in this country. Oh, you were supposed to laugh there. No, he's acting foolish. David, that's not the decorum of a king. He says, I don't care about that. I'm honoring God. And God's the focus of this. This is not about me. It's about God. And he worships God. Things go really well for David now. Things are going really good for him. And he's winning all of his battles. And he's having great victories. He tells God, what I'd like to do is build a house for your ark. And Nathan, the prophet of God, says, go ahead. And God says, wait a minute. Let's hold that thought a moment. Nathan, you go back to David and tell him, it's not for him to build it. I'll let his son build it. So David now is given a promise from God that one of his descendants will sit on his throne forever. Saul never got that, but David got it. And things are going really good for David. And then it gets to be battle time in the spring once more. And you know this story. It's there in 2 Samuel chapter 11. After David got mad at God, now David has to experience God on another level. He has to receive the mercy and grace of God. What do we do with a God that doesn't follow the law? All of us deal with that God. Because if God followed the law, what would have happened to you the first time you sinned against him? Uzzah city, you're down with Uzzah. The God that follows the law says, you deserve to die when you sin. That's what ought to happen to you. If I'm going to keep the law, then I'm going to strike you dead the moment that you sin. Well, no. God didn't do that. God was treated irreverently. It was personal to God. God was being treated a lot like an idol in the Uzzah story. He was being manipulated and moved in ways that were not right for Israel to deal with God. And they were beginning to think God was in a box, literally. And God shows himself to be holy and reverent, defends himself, defends his cause. And rightly so. We understand that. God defends because people were treating him as common. But now David doesn't go out to battle. David stays home. David's resting on top of the palace. David looks over and sees her. We all know her. It's Bathsheba. And David is attracted. Well, it's probably lust, but he's attracted anyway. And he is drawn to her. And he draws her to him. And our photo album gets a little confusing here, doesn't it? We've got Michael's picture and Abigail's picture, and now we've got Bathsheba's picture with David. And who's his wife? And all the answers, well, yes. All these pictures are accurate. Well, how did he get that one? You don't want to hear that story. He killed her husband. He'd already had an affair with her. She was already pregnant. But that's when our ancestor killed her husband. Put him in the battle lines. It was even worse than that. It would have been all right if David had just taken a sword and met him upstairs and hacked him off, I guess. But that's not what happened. Right? Puts him in a battle line. Says, when it's really going bad, then I want you to pull everybody around him. Now, maybe that's some sort of honor. He's going to let him die in battle, but it's also a little unclean. I can't have everybody knowing that I took out Bathsheba's wife, but he won't sleep with his own wife, and she's pregnant, and I can't sell that if he won't sleep with her. Uriah's dead. David gets the message. He's lied to Uriah. He's killed Uriah. He's taken Uriah's wife. Well, not every picture in the photo album is nice and clean, is it? Sometimes, you don't have any black sheep in your family, do you? You don't have any photo albums where you cut someone out and kept half of it. No, none of you have those photos. Oh, we've all got photos that way. We've all done things that we needed mercy for. But we have trouble with the God that gives mercy to David. The one that strikes Uzzah dead, we understand that guy. He knew the law. He should have kept the law. He died. But David knows this God. He knows adultery and murder and lying are wrong. And God doesn't strike him dead. Because God gives him mercy, something he didn't have coming to him. And then he gives him grace. Then he gives him grace. We know the law says that when the situation takes place that David has with Bathsheba, that both he and she should be taken out and stoned. The penalty is death. Take them out. Get rid of them. God doesn't keep the law. Well, at least the child dies, right? There's justice in this story. Oh, the child's innocent. There's consequences to sin. Their baby dies. I don't find much help in that, other than David having to be hit in the face that his relationship with God is compromised. And he passionately pleads with God for the life of the child, and the child dies. And David gets up in a huff, goes off to do his thing. No, it's not what the story says. The child dies, and David gets up, shaves, eats, and goes to church. The very thing we wouldn't do. But David has the heart of God. He understands who God is. His name means beloved of God. I know because that's my name too. Right, David? That's our name. We're beloved of God. I'm so happy my mother named me that. I'd really like to know if she knew that's what it meant when she did it, but I think she did. No, actually, I'm named for a dead uncle. But, oh well, that's another story, right? No, but I am beloved of God, and so was David. And David understood and has his heart, and he says, I got angry when God kept the law, but, oh God, don't keep the law today. God, give me mercy and grace. Don't give me what I deserve today. I saw what happened when you gave Saul what he deserved, and you took your Holy Spirit away from him, and I saw what happened to him. Don't take your Holy Spirit away from me. I don't want to go mad. I don't want to lose my mind. I don't want to lose my relationship with you. So he pleads for the child, and when the child dies, David gets up and goes to church. And he understands that his relationship with God is the most important thing in his life. More important than Bathsheba, more important than a dead child. He understands that he was the man after God's own heart, and he wants to be that guy. He receives mercy and grace and stays in relationship with God. We don't have any evidence that he's ever outside of a saved state. It's hard for us to swallow. Only legally do we put David outside of a saved state. Nothing in Scripture moves David outside of a saved state. David is a man after God's own heart that messes his life up horribly, but who passionately wants the will of God overriding everything in his life. And I hope that's true for you, that at some point you understand that you received the mercy of God, that he didn't strike you dead when you deserved it. And what overrides everything else in your life is you passionately desire God's will over your heart. Oh, Nathan comes and preaches a little short sermon to David about lambs and neighbors, and David has to get it in his head. I'm the abusive, murdering adultering sinner. Oh God, what will you do with me? I'll use you. Now, the weirdest part of the story is that we turn the page and there's Bathsheba still in the picture. They don't get killed, and she stays in the family. Not only does she stay in the family, she's holding another little baby, and his name is Solomon. And God says, I love that little guy. He's my man. He's going to build me a house to live in. He's going to build the house for this ark to sit in. I love that kid. And of all the story, I don't get that part. Surely David shouldn't get to keep Bathsheba and them have another baby and him be blessed by God. But that's what happens in the story. Because, look at your take home this morning. We deal with a God that doesn't follow the rules. Thank God. He allows us to have hope. God is bigger than what I think about him. And that's why we're okay with a God whose grace supersedes his law. We have a God whose grace supersedes his law. Oh, it hurts when we break God's will. It hurts when we break God's commandments. But we have a God whose grace supersedes his law. And David is his man. And we all sit there and say, boo, David should be out. Boo, he shouldn't get to keep Bathsheba. That's not fair. It's not right. We understand the God of Uzzah. But we live with the God of grace. And we only live because he is a God of grace. Without that grace, we have no hope. And with that grace, we find that God is bigger than what I know about him. He does things far differently than I can rationalize. The next time God doesn't do what you want him to, just say thank you and give it a little time. And passionately pursue his heart and long for relationship with him. The song before the lesson, I surrender all. Have you done that? All to Jesus I surrender. All to him. My heart I give. I've surrendered all of that to him. David got to that point. All to Jesus I surrender. All my goodness, all my badness, all my life. I give all that to God. And he's a man after God's own heart. And the song you're fixing to sing, giving him all my heart. Have you done that? He has allowed you to live till today. Will you give him all your heart as we stand and sing together?